Okay, I'm back. I'm in a bit of a rush, so I've just had a shower not very long ago, grabbed myself a coffee, and now we're going to finish off this modal as I've got like 5 minutes to do it. So, with that being said, I'm going to have some coffee. Let's get on with this. Let's get into this. Let's do this. Right. So, just a reminder of where we're at here. We've built this part of the modal. Now we need to build the top header part of the modal. So we've recently just added this pools heading. Now we need to do these bits. We're going to start with the drop down here, and we're going to make these into buttons because that's kind of what they are. Again, I'm assuming this would be some kind of value for that. So let's just check. Yeah, there's nothing here about what this would be. So I'm assuming this is some kind of drop down maybe, or I'm not sure what this is supposed to do, to be perfectly honest. But for now, we'll just create this because it's simple enough. So what we're going to do this is just create a button, and then when you click it, a UL element drops out the bottom with this kind of stuff in it. So what we'll do is create the button first. So if we go back to the drop down code we need to write, if we go here and we go to this modal, so we first need to create a new component, right? So to do this, we'll go to UI, create a new folder, and we'll just call it drop down, like this. Inside this, new file, drop down .tsx. And so what we want to do in here is I'm going to copy the code from somewhere else again, just to get the boilerplate stuff, like this. Get rid of this here as we don't need it, and yeah, that should be that. So what we want to do here is create a button. We're gonna probably want a div actually, just to wrap this stuff in. So we'll do that as well. I'll just create the div, leave the div here. We need to style that at the moment. And then inside this, we're going to create the button. The reason I've got the div is because we need to actually wrap the URL in something. Sorry, not the URL. We need to wrap this list in something, and we're going to hide the list. So the next thing we need to do with regards to this, so we have a button. We need to create in here the current. Well, for now, we'll just have 24-hour, like this. I think that's what the text is. There's a few things we need to do. So you'll see we have this 24-hour label and a drop down SVG. So 24H, right, like this. And then there's a span, so like so. Oh, need to do this with 2 spaces rather than 4, makes life a bit easier. And then inside here we need a span tag, like this, and inside of this we'll put the SVG, and this is going to change based on whether or not the drop down is open. So for now, I'm going to just go to get the SVG, which I was messing around with in here. I wanted a component for it, so we'll do this. We'll just get the SVG icon. So we'll go back to our app. I'm going to just do function, drop down icon, like so. And then we'll just render this inside of here for now, like this. So if we go back to our code, we need to actually import this somewhere as well. So if we go back to our UI file, and we'll just do import drop down. I'm not sure why did I export it from in here. Oh, I know why. Drop down, and then we need to change this to drop down props as well. Make it work properly. For now, we'll just comment this out because we don't need it. And then go back, export drop drop down. There we go, and then boom. So there's that done. So now if we go back to our app file, sorry, not to our app file, our modal header, and in here we're just going to import this real quick, like so. And now we probably have a messy, which you can see, drop down component that's not clickable, because I'm assuming it's, well, there's nothing to happen. It is clickable, sorry, there's nothing happening. So we need to style this because currently it looks a bit of a mess. So let's go back to the code, go back to the drop down, do two things. Let's also wrap this in a div as well, and then we want to make this a flex. Actually, yeah, no, let's just get rid of the div, just do it in the button, and we'll just do class name on here, flex first, because that needs to sort this out, and then items center, I think it is, or align center. There we go. Okay, so that's perfect. So now we have this sorted out. We need to do the rest of this. So go back to the Figma file. Have a sip of your drink if you've got one, obviously. And then let's just start to style this button a second. So we want the background to be white. So I'm assuming it's BG-white for Tailwind's white, and then we want the border radius, I think it's rounded dash XL for the border, and then the shadow, I think it's shadow dash SM because it's a small shadow, and then it's zinc if I remember, so border zinc 200 and border dash 2, and that should, there we go, give us this obscure thing. So the next thing we need to do is have some kind of width here. So you'll notice that this is a bit of a problem, so we need to add some padding to this, and that should probably give us some kind of width. So if we look at the padding that's on it, 12 on the left, and then 15 on the right, and 15 up and down. So we need to figure out the measurements. So if we go into the docs for Tailwind a second, and we take a look at the padding, we need to look for 15 or something close to it. So again, I'm using Tailwind, and these are custom measurements, so we need to actually change these values at some point after so that it matches the designs. So yeah, we'll use 3.5. So 3.5, we'll do PY 3.5. So we have 16 or 14, I think it is, on top and bottom. And then we need to, so there's the top and bottom padding done. Now we need to do the left and the right. So the left, according to this, is going to be 12 to the left, and I think 17 to the right, but I'm not entirely sure on that. We'll just look at 12 for both sides a minute and then see what it looks like, and then change it. 12 is going to be P3, so PX3, we'll do that, see what this looks like. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. We do need to create some kind of gap between this and this, so that's something else to note, which is going to be 9, so we want it to always be 9, that's fine. So we'll just say 10 or 8, because there's not going to be a 9, I doubt. Yeah, 8 there is, so PL2. So we want this to have a class name of PL-2, so it's padding left of 2, and that should create this. Now we need to also continue on our quest here. We need to add the font, the correct sizing. So you'll notice that that is 24. 9 between that, and then I think there should be more on this side, but anyway. That's text bold. Okay, so we want text dash sm font dash bold. I think that's it. Okay, that makes sense to me. It doesn't look right though. That's my issue. 24H because the font's not right, but like 9, and then there's 9 between these two. There's the problem. So we have to do between the larger one. So 9 again, so that's 2. So we need to change the padding on the top. PY to 2. Okay, that's a bit better. That looks more like it now. To be honest, yeah, it looks much more like it. So that's good. And then we're getting somewhere with it. So that's cool. Now we need to make this do something. So when we click it, there's not really any hover effect applied to this. I'm assuming you click on this, and then you have these options, and this comes out the bottom. So that's what I'm going to assume at the moment. Also, I wonder if we can change that modal when we open it. Change that background that appears, right? Because when you click on this, you have this grayness. We want to make it slightly different. So where do we set these values? I'm assuming BG, we want zinc 200. There we go. That's a bit better, a bit more readable. I think that's the colour that's on here. That looks like a different colour though, but it has a drop shadow on it, so I'm not going to. Yeah, that's the right colour. If I go to colours, and then we just search this. So we search this for colours a second. If we go here, okay, there isn't the colour in here for that. So that was a bit of a guess. So what we actually need to do then is go back to this. Where's that value we just set? Oh gosh. Here, just delete this, and we'll just style background. Oh, there we go. That'll do that. So there's that. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. Progress is being made here. So we now have this. This looks more like the design, so that's a start. It still looks a bit off. The spacing and the fonts, definitely. There's a lot more padding between this. I think there's like 15 to the right, and then on this one it's 12, so I'm assuming that's 15 between all of them. Let's just go back on this and quickly debug it and check the padding value here. So if I just do padding dash right and do 15 pixels on it, see what it looks like. Yeah. That looks a bit better. And also, I feel like this needs a bit more on the span. We need to do like 3 maybe, rather than, yeah, I think that looks a bit better. Yeah. So we need to do the padding left 3 on the drop down. So the PL is going to be 3 instead of 2, and we also need to increase the padding on the right side. So PR is going to be 3.5, and then that should make that slightly more. There we go. That looks better. That looks more like the actual design now. We just need to change the fonts, and then that will be correct. And then maybe the shadow on this is a bit different. So we'll just copy this a second. I'm going to just create another class in this index file. Sorry, in this app CSS file, which we're just going to call. We don't need this. We'll just do dot drop down. Save that, and then go back to our code, and then apply this this style, and then remove this shadow SM because we don't need that anymore, and see if that makes a difference. Okay, yeah, that looks even more like the design now, I believe. Somewhat like it, I think. The border might be a bit too thick, but what's the border in here? Does it have the code for it? Border 1 pixel solid. We'll add that as well, and I'll remove this for now. And then just do the app CSS file, put this in here. There we go. That looks much better, I believe. More or less like what we're trying to create. So that will do. There we go. So, perfect. Now, we need to just align stuff properly in here so that it looks correct. So if we go to the header, I'm going to create a flex in this, and then that should sort that problem out. And then WL-auto, just to, or ML, my bad, MR actually. Now we'll put that to the end for a minute. Okay, nice. So now we have this. Also, isn't that? No, that is correct. So we have this. Now what we want to do is actually make this drop down work, right? So we have to create some code that has a drop down underneath this, and we're going to hide that drop down until somebody clicks this and opens that. So I suspect we're going to want to also add some hover effect to this so that you know you're hovering over it, but we'll worry about that later. And then when you click it, I want this to sort of animate and twist, but we'll worry about that in good time. And for now, we're just going to create this drop down that sits underneath. So this is it. I'm assuming what it would look like is something, I can't really copy it, but it's going to drop down from this in some way. I think it will look a bit weird, but we'll just worry about that in another option, in another situation. So let's just create the drop down itself. So if I go to the drop down, we could make this another component, but for now we'll just have it like this. So we'll have a UL underneath this, and then this will have LIs in it, and then we'll just, I'm going to just do a couple for now, so we'll have last 24 hours, and then another one will be 24H, because that's what it says, and then 7 days, like this. Okay, now let's go back to the code. Here it is, looking all disgusting. Let's just style it to begin with. So if I go back to this, we need to have these styles on it. So first we need to add a background, so we'll add BG in here, BG-white, like that. Then we add border again, which is the same as before, I believe. Border radius 12 yet, so we'll just do rounded XL-XL. I've also spelled rounded wrong, so I'll just copy it from this because it makes life a bit easier. Like this. Now if we go back to the code again, we'll see we have this rounded thing. We need some padding. Border 20, 20. I'm assuming it's 20 all the way around it. Oh, it's 12 on this one, 20 on this one. So we want 12 because that's what it will be when it's selected. So we'll do 12. Padding -12. Oh, no, not 12. Oh, my days, 12 pixels. My bad. So let's just search for this padding. And then we'll quickly look for 12 pixels within this, which is 3. So we do P3, not P12. That would be one ugly thing. Okay. Nice. We've got this here, and then the next thing we have to do is the font, and let's do the font. So the font is going to be 14 pixels and 700. So font -SM, text -SM, and text -bold is what we want for this. Text -SM and text font -bold. That's how we do these two, and that should, there we go. So now we have this. We need to create the spacing between the two of them as well. Now you'll notice this is obviously smaller because we don't have the larger like months. If I do this one, last 3 months, so if I do this, it becomes slightly bigger. And also there's not a selected one, which will create more, so we'll do that in a second. The spacing between this and this is 23, but the reason is because there's like a div that these are in. So if we do these, we need to add some padding to them as well. So like the class name here, I think this will have more padding, so that's 12. There's 8, so we need to have, I think, an 8 all around yet. PL-8 and then PY-8. Not 8, but 8 pixels. We'll do that again. 2. Okay, just check what that does. Yeah, so that makes it correct. So we need to do that to the rest of them as well. That has the correct spacing and makes up for it. So we do class name here. Oh. What have I done? There we go. Should work now. Okay, cool. So that works as you'd expect it to work. That looks right. Let's have a look. Yeah, it looks about right to me. There's a nice amount of spacing between them now. So that's good. Okay. And then we just need to do position, absolute, width, 100%, maybe not. Oh, hang on. Or width, like 300 pixels, and then Z index. Oh, Z. That won't work. We'll worry about that in a minute. Okay, so position, absolute, and then left, 0. Okay. Position, relative, on that. Then this will be 0, or maybe we want right 0. Width 200 pixels. There we are. We're getting somewhere with it now. So this is what we need to do, and then we need to add a Z index as well, so that it goes above the Z index of 1, so that it goes above that. Then we need to, on all of the items, I'm just experimenting with this, and we'll implement this in a second. We need to make all the items here have cursor pointer, but we'll get to that in a second. Let's just quickly check. So this also needs a border and the usual stuff. So we'll just take these two things, right? I'm going to go into this. In fact, I think the class is the same, so we can just use the same drop-down class that I implemented here. So if I look at the app CSS file and just paste these in, the border is the color is the same, and so is the shadow and drop down. So yeah, we just need to use this drop down class again. So we can go back to the drop down, and on the actual drop down itself, we can just put this in here, which will create this nice shadow effect for us. So that's nice. The next thing we need to do is actually put the code that I just wrote in. So if we go back to this, we go to this div, we need to make this class relative, so that when we position the U element here with absolute, it's relative to this div, rather than, if you notice, if we take this off, what will happen is this will float over to this side, like this. If we were to put like position, because now it's relative to the div above it, so if we did position left, it would do that. Sorry, if I put it onto this and we did position left on here rather than right, it would do that, because it's now referring to the div in the tree above it. So that's why we have to make it relative. So if I go back to this, and in here I do relative, which I think is the correct thing for it, and then here we now, so yeah, relative, this div's relative. I'll put in the right div. Oh, hang on a minute. And position, this hasn't got any styling on it. Position absolute, there we go. Yeah, so that's fine. So we need to take this and put this on here. Add absolute positioning. Then we need to add right 0. I think that is the correct term. I can't remember. Yeah, it is. So that should do that. And then we need to add a Z index. So I can't remember what the Z index property is for Tailwind, so we need to just quickly search Z index so I can take a look at this. So we'll just add 10, Z10, which would then, in theory, push it above that. This doesn't look to me like it's actually gone right 0 though. What am I missing? Absolute positioning. Relative, if I just take that. Position. Relative. Onto this div. Okay. I feel like I've missed something. Is it because we have got a whip set maybe? Okay, we need to set a width for it. That would help. I'll set a minimum width. Min dash width, which we'll just set at. Yeah, we will set it as. Where's the minimum width on here? Width 225. So we'll set a minimum width of 225. Menu class, and we'll just go into this and add a value in app CSS, which we'll call dot menu, and we'll just do min width 225. So that should now work. If we quickly do this, we forgot to set the relative div on this, so the class that we're using is not the right one. I've spelled it incorrectly. So if I quickly just do on here position relative like this, it will align it correctly, and we need to just copy this because I've spelt it incorrectly, and then go back to our drop down and change this here to the correct spelling. You're probably watching this and realizing that I've done that and probably shouting at me, so fair enough, because quite a simple mistake. So now we have a drop down forming, which is nice. We also want to add this hover effect, so let's do this quickly. So if you notice in the design, when we hover on something, it has this background of like a grayish color. So let's just quickly search Tailwind colors to see if that color exists, and if it does, then that makes life much simpler, because we can just literally use a hover class from Tailwind. See if it's in here, which shock, it is not. So we'll have to just create this. What I'm going to do is just go in here and do it, and then we'll do a config later. App CSS. So we want to do dot drop down, and then on every li in that drop down, on the hover, there we go. I want to do background color that, and then that should, there you go. So now we have like a nice hover effect. Also, I'm going to need to make them rounded. I think they're not rounded, so that's something else to consider. That looks about right. But we need to make these rounded. So you'll notice the radius is 8 pixels on them. So 8 pixels is 2, because I remember that now. So we need to go to search borders again, because you can't just do that. I remember this now. So you have to do border radius, and then we need to look for 8 pixels. Sorry, so rounded LG is what we want for that one. So if I go back to the code again, and I go into the drop down, go where it is, scroll up a second, let's just take a look at this. Now what I want to do is here add this to the LIs, not to the, there we go. But don't worry about this stuff, because we're going to render this differently in a second when we have props and things to pass in. So now we've got this nice rounded effects. We also want to put a pointer on it as well, like this. Okay, that will make it, in theory, I don't know why it's not doing it, but I know why, because we need to do cursor. I think it's cursor pointer. Let's just look at cursor. It is cursor pointer. That's why that's not working. So if we go back and change this again, there we go. Now that should give us the cursor pointer click effect. So that's looking lovely. So now that works nicely. We need to also make this sort of selected icon. So if we go back to this, and what we'll do is, again, we'll just export this as an SVG, okay? And then the plan will be to put this or display this if it's selected. So what we can do is export this as a SVG, and then I'm going to just go into this program and just convert this to JSX again, just so I can have an SVG. So let's copy this, go here. We'll sort this component out later because it's a bit of a mess at the moment, and just call it checked. So what we'll do on this one is we want to create a span, okay, and inside of the span we're going to paste this checked component like this, and obviously now that's going to render it oddly, as you can see, but it looks starting to look nice, right? Starting to get what we want to get with it. So now we just do flex on this, and then that puts it here, and then again we want the items to be center, so items, is it align center or item center? Item center, of course it is. Just copy this logic here, logic but class. There's that centered, and then we want to push this over to the other side. So we can do this by, on this class, on this span, just adding class name ml-auto, that will push it over to the left, and then there's that done. We also need to add some margin or padding to the right of this span so that it doesn't go right up to the edge. So we'll just add one. I think we should probably add a bit more though. Based on this, let's have a look how far it is. 22 from the edge. So for that to happen, we already have to remember though that this has already got some padding on the outside, which is 12 pixels, and so we've just added 4 pixels. So to make it 22, we need to add 10 pixels. So if we go to this, we need to go padding and just look for the closest thing to 22 pixels on here, because again we need to modify some of these classes later, which I think I keep saying throughout this tutorial, so hopefully it's in your minds that it's something we have to do. So 24 and 20 is the closest, so we'll do PR5 for now, and I will just update this later. So now if we go back to the app, you'll see we now have this is selected, and that looks a bit off. So we'll just change this to like 3 to make it look a bit less of an issue. Okay, so there we are, there's that looking rather tidy. And now, because it's already checked, that's why, we could probably do some interesting things to that, because you don't really need it to be able to hover on a selected event. So this will just say if it's selected, we won't have this hover. We'll sort of logic that out in a second, and then we can just place it over here right at the edge and it'll look better. So that's good. We have everything we need here now. Obviously we need to do some other things. We need to decide whether or not this is going to be open or closed. So that's another thing we have to do. We have to make the selected value that we select in here appear in here. So that's something else we have to do, and go down that. So this is going to be a controlled component because you're going to want to have something. Actually, no, this is going to be an uncontrolled component where we have a on click that could update. Well, we'll figure that out. There's many ways you can do this, but yeah, let's carry on. So I'm actually going to just one last thing. I'm going to make this just not have any because it looks correct as it is, and maybe it needs a bit, but like it looks more or less where it should be, and we need to just add this style. So let's just do this quickly. So whether or not this is open, we need to do some logic now. So we'll do const. We'll just use the use state hook set open equals use state, and then we'll just do false for now. And so here have some logic that just renders this open and then if it's open, we display this in here like so. Okay. Then we need to have an on-click handler here. So on-click, and then we'll just do a really simple set open. Oh, set open, not open, like this. And so that should do this for us. So there's another thing there's a lot of things we have to account for. Okay, what if you click outside of this? So that's another thing we need to worry about, which we'll do in a second. We can use references and things for that, but we'll write the code to do that in a second. We'll create a hook that just detects whether or not you're clicking outside, and if you're clicking outside, then you can close this. So that's something else we'll do. And then, yeah, we're getting somewhere though. So I want to create this arrow on top of the div next. So we'll just do that. HTML drop down create arrow, like this kind of thing, but we want it to appear. I think there's a way to do this with a tooltip, and then we'll just copy this tooltip HTML, and I think if you do this, it has an arrow. There we go. So what we want to do is the arrow situation, like this bottom arrow. So let's just see how we do that arrow. Is it in here? Right tooltip, left tooltip, tooltip text. Here we go, bottom arrow. So this is what we want. So top arrow, we'll just copy this for a second. So we have an arrow, and then we'll style the arrow. So what I'm going to do is we need to create for this menu. So we have that class already. So if I go to the app CSS to where this menu is, and I just paste this in here, and we just do dot menu. I think we can just do dot menu after. Let's just check the HTML for how this works. Tooltip text. No, that's okay. We can just do it. We don't need this. We just need the, I believe, just this. And I think that should work, which it does. There's a little arrow here. We need to just position that arrow now. So I think to position the arrow, we don't need left. We need to set it to, where do we want this on the design? I'm trying to think. I think it would sort of be halfway between. So maybe we'll just do like left 75%, or maybe 80%, I guess. 85%. Okay, 83% then. And then we need to change the color of it to something interesting, which is white, and obviously that border is going to do its thing. We need to make it white. So if we do that, I think it will cover the border actually, but we'll check. Black, I want it to be white, which it does. There we go. Does exactly what we want it to do. So we just need to change this beautiful thing to the position. We'll change it to 80%. In fact, it might be easier to do 83, but we'll change it to, I think we need to check something because I don't, oh, what am I doing here? White, please. Yeah, we don't need to potentially use right. We could just use left. Sorry, we don't have to use left. We could use right. It might be easier to do that. So I'm going to just quickly check that. I mean, it gets the same result, so that's what we want. But if I just do right instead of left, the value might just look better. So right 0. Okay, right. Let's just do 25%, maybe 15% from the right side. There we go. So I think that would be better. We'll do right 15%, which would make sense because we're also aligning it to the right, the actual UL element, the menu element. So that would make sense to do this. Just do right 15%. So now we have that. We also need to push it down a little bit because it looks a bit off and you can't really see the arrows. So to do this, we need to push this entire container down a little bit. So we'll just give it some margin. Margin top. I'll just see what it looks like in here, just with like 5 pixels. Trying to think, maybe like this. I think, yeah, maybe 5 pixels is the one, but I'm not sure how I feel about the 5 pixels. I think it looks kind of okay. I think it looks a bit weird as per the design. I'm not sure. I mean, they want it on this bit actually, don't they? And I guess because it's going to come out there in a minute, we'll see how it looks when we add the next part of this in. But I also think we'll make that slightly less. We'll make this maybe 10, which we'll do, and then I think what we'll also do is go back to our drop down and just for now add an MT-1 on the top of it, which we'll do. So yeah, progress is being made here. We now have this nice little drop down going on, so it looks quite nice. So that's good. We got this hover effect now, so that we can hover over it. So the next thing we need to look at doing is how we deal with this. Maybe we should rotate this next. I think that would be a good idea. And also we need to select, actually make some logic happen when we select one of these values. So in reality, we probably want to, so what will happen if you think about this is that when we change this value here, okay, when we click it, it's going to trigger this code here to re-render, okay, in theory, because we're changing this, so the values will be different because of we're changing it, right? So in that case, do we want to have a selected state? Yes, we want to have the state controlled above so that the components that need to know that state can see what that state is and then re-render based on when that state changes. So this will be a controlled component in terms of the state, but the values are always going to be the same. So the value that's selected is going to be controlled from above. Okay, and we'll have to pass in an on-click or an on-change kind of way of handling that. But there will be some default values that we don't need to pass in. Although this is a UI element, So maybe we do want to do that to make it more reusable and more composable. So I think we will make this a completely controlled element, actually, because it'll be more composable. We could reuse this in theory then, you see. If we wanted to use this somewhere else, we would just pass in a configuration. Oh, no, we don't. No, this will be controlled. We just pass in some configuration for the drop down to work, and then it'll just be a control component in terms of it has a change value and a selected value. So that's easily done. Okay, so that's a good point. So now we can start to do that logic, right? So if we think about this, we need to have some like options. So like what the drop down options are, and they need to have an ID and a label, like a thing we render. Okay, so that's something we can do. So we'll have like an interface called option, and this will have a label which is going to be a string, and a value will give an ID, we'll just give it a number so that we can render whatever number is selected somewhere. Okay, so this will just be a number, so like 1 2 3 4 5 etc. So options, we'll have an option, an array of option, so that's great. We need to like the default option, so we know what's selected or selected, which will set as a selected ID, because what it is, which will set as a prop above it, and the state will control the selected ID in the component above it. So that's how that will work. So we have options, and then we'll have to have like an on change. We'll get to the rest of that in a second. Let's just set this up a minute. So what do we want to happen here? Okay, well, we want this options to render in this. So then there'll be some other stuff going on. Like we need to figure out if it's selected or not. Okay, so to do this, we're going to do the following. So we'll get from the props the options, like so, and then we need to render these options. So options and options.map, and then have an option. In fact, we'll just deconstruct these objects as they come in. We'll just get the ID and the label like this, and then we just need to return in here an option. Okay, like this. And then what happens is in here we'll put the label, okay, like so, and then the ID is where it gets interesting. So we want to see if the selected ID that's passed in is equal to the current ID, okay, of this element that we're option that we're looping over. And if it is, we want to do something different in terms of the rendering. As you can see here, this is the styles that we apply to a selected option, and this is the styles that we'll be applying to a non-selected option. So to do this dynamically, we can literally just use the backticks, and then use our, also we need to render this as well using the brackets, like so, the curly braces, sorry, not brackets. And then now we have this is going to be slightly different. So if the ID, so here we can write some JavaScript logic. So if the ID is equal to the selected ID, and then this is the case, we want to return this string. So what we want to return is cursor pointer, okay, like so. And we also want to return this. In fact, actually, yeah, we don't need to apply these styles if we don't need them. So that will do this. And then the interesting part now, so label, and we need to add some more logic here, okay, because we don't want to render this next bit of code that I'm going to write unless there's a check. So if there is, then we need to render this as well. Okay, so if if ID is equal, this might be logical to make a function here because we're doing the same check twice. So we could make a function to check this, but for the simplicity of this and just readability, I'm going to just do this for now. And that. So what this will do is if these conditions are true, then we want to render this like that. Otherwise, don't render this, don't add these classes in, and just keep it like this. So that's what we need to do here. So we don't need that anymore. Okay, and now we'll just test this real quick. So if we go to our mobile header, we're going to just create an array here, like so. So we'll do options, which will be an array, and then it'll be like label or an array, and then we'll have objects in it with a label like this. And we'll just say, for now, we'll just be like, well, we want to create a label, and we're going to call this label 24H, I think it was, like so, and then, or 24 hours, and then we'll just do like value, or no, ID, sorry, will be 1. We'll start off with 0, actually, just keep it in line with what you should do. And then here we'll do, so last, or 7 days, for example, last 24 hours, or 24H, I think it is, whatever the design says, something like this. And then we'll do another one, last 3 months, like so. Just quickly update the IDs like this, and then we'll just select it, or default, or selected, I think it is. So another prop, selected ID, and that'll just be 0 for now. And then in theory this should work as we expect it. There we go. So now we have this going on here. We need to tidy this up because we don't want this cursor pointer actually on selected items, which is, yeah, we've got that slightly wrong. So this bit we just want to have on here. Okay, so we want it on the normal ones. And then there's a class we need to apply for cursors now, which is to hide the cursor and the hover effect when it's cursor default is what we want on the non on this. There we go. And that's fine. And also we need to extend something else. What we need to do in the app CSS file, because we're setting this hover color here, we need to just create a class for this. We'll just call it like li-hover. Okay, and we'll go back to the code, and we need to just update that drop down so that this is what it is here, and then otherwise it's just this. That's correct. Yeah. Otherwise that, and then also just create another class quickly where we have .li hover dash default, and that will just be background color hash FFFF. There we go. So it's just white, and that's the color that we apply if the thing is selected, and we don't need to do that. So that should fix those problems. So okay, that's not done that. Okay, li hover, the reason is because we need to add the hover in. That's why. You're probably all sat there again laughing, going, George, what are you doing, mate? Hover. and same with this one. Hover. There we go. So now it doesn't do anything because it's selected. These two you can select. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so now we need to do a couple of things, right? We need to pass in some onChange handler so that when we click this, we can change the state in a component above, in a parent component, which will then change the selected ID, forcing this component to then re-render again with the new selected value down here. So to do this, we need to add an onChange, which we'll just call onChange, and we're going to pass in like the ID of the selected value here, which we'll get from this. So onChange, we just pass in an ID, which is a number, like so, equals, and then we just return void because we're not returning any value from this. So that's what we need to do here, and then onChange comes in. You'll notice here we have this. So what we now need to do is have an onChange that's part of this. Also tidy this up a minute by pressing that. So that looks nice, like this, and then we'll just put some new line, and now we need onChange here, and then this onChange will literally just do the following. It will just update the value, so onChange, and we call the onChange like this, and then we pass in the ID, which is there, and that's how that works. Simple. Okay, let's finish this off then. So we've got this now. We need to select this and make it do something, right? So what I want to do is go in here, and we now have this onChange that's going to come in here and render different stuff based on that. So what we want to do is, where we're doing this in here, we need to handle that somehow. Okay, so in here we'll just have the following code. We'll have a state again. We do const selected value, and we'll just say set selected value like this equals use state, and then for now we'll just do 0 as the selected value, and we'll just pass that in. Like selected ID will be in here like so, and then we'll just have the set selected value in the onChange, which will be this, and that should render and work a charm now. Okay. What have I done wrong? What have I forgotten? Some basic thing, I'd imagine. Options, selected ID, onChange. What happens is we pass the onChange in, and then here we call the onChange and set the ID. I know why, because this is onChange rather than onClick. There's the issue. So that should now work. There we go. So you can see this is working nicely now. We select it and it will do this. Now what will happen in theory is we update this here, and then it will re-render. What I'm also imagining will happen is when we select this, we actually close the close this, which coincidentally I didn't think I could use select to do this, which might have been easier, but we're here now. So what I can also do is when we click that, we'll just do two things here, right? We'll actually do this, we'll select the value, and then we'll also set open to not open and close it, because in theory you want you'd expect the behavior to be that it would re-render the data behind this. So we just close it like this, and then when it opens again it does that. And then what we also want to do is change the value in here to whatever the value is in here, right? So what we would do is we know the ID. So when we have the options that come in, so we would just render the label inside the button text. So here, instead of doing this, what we do is we will just have the options. We need to just find the label. So we would do options dot find. So we just find the first one rather than loop over every one of them. And when we find it, we just return the value. And then we want to have the option where it equals the option dot ID is equal to the selected ID, and then we just want to go label, and then that should work like so. So now you have last 7 hours, last 24 hours, and last 3 months. So that's what that should do, and then you can see it's selected and stuff happens in this. So there's that. And the beauty about this is this makes this component quite reusable, because it has options, a selected ID, and on-change properties that you pass in. And so you could reuse this all over the application with different values and different fields based on whatever it is you want to do. So this is how you'd make a nice little drop down like that. You'd also want to take these and put them in their own file, which is something we'll probably do in a second, just to tidy this up a little bit. But yeah, that's the main code for this. Okay, so that's how that would work. And then if this was to actually function and you were actually to interact with some API or some data source and you want to update the state when you click on that button, that drop down, and you click on a value, it would probably re-render. So what you'd probably have happening in here, right, is you'd click this, then when you click it, some spinning thing happens here, or some kind of loading indication would happen within this, and then it would fetch new data, and then it would render the data here based on what you did. And the other thing as well, you might want to change certain things, like for example, instead of having a selected, you might have a selected ID, but you might change the structure of how this works based on the use case. For example, if you're what you select, you might need to send some data or a query, a specific query to an API based on what you select. So you might have an object that you store which has the value for the API in it, like the URL for the API, or alternatively you could have some function that just does that based on the ID that you pass in. So that's another option. So that's something to keep in mind. If I go back to the modal header, also we'll make this a slightly more reusable component too, where we just pass in components in here, which I think is actually a better idea. And then you'd have this on this state inside the app rather than in here. So that's something else to consider. So that's initially what we've got going on anyway. So we're starting to build this now. This UI is starting to look something decent, right? So the other thing to note is obviously in here it's slightly different, but I don't know what we'd be rendering in here for the rest of these values. So that's something to be aware of, because obviously if you had like last 7 days in here, this performance range is going to get pushed right over to this. So I think you might be better off having this either underneath this or above this, or maybe somewhere in here, or like just a general tooltip somewhere. I think this needs to be, I would remove this just simply because of, I don't think it will all fit in here nicely. Then this bit here is just a button, so for this we can just copy the code we already have and create a button for that. So if we go drop down, go in here, there's this code here which is basically the same code that we're going to need to create that button. So if I just do UI new folder, so this is obviously also a use case for reusing, and a drop down would actually be more of an element that we'd have, a component we'd have outside of this UI folder, because it's made up of UI elements rather than an actual UI element itself. So that's something else to consider. So button.tsx. So inside of this, I'm going to have the usual import React from React, like this, and then in here we want to have export default function called button, like so. Boom. Oh, not an array, but we want to return this code here, and we will simply fix this. So we don't want that because we don't have this option thing. We don't need the on click really for this. I mean, you would do, but we don't because they're not doing anything with it. And then we change this to 2 spaces, save that. Now we want to change this drop down icon to some other icon that we're going to pass it in, and it's also going to be on the other side, mixing it up a bit. So we want this logo, which again I'm going to just export it from Figma a second as an SVG, and then we're going to import it into here again and just convert it into the code we need. Just because we're working fast, I don't want to mess around with this. I'm just trying to get this done as quickly as possible because I've got things to do, unfortunately. So where is that thing I just downloaded? Is that it there? Vector SVG, there it is. So convert this, grab this code, this function from line 3 to 38, then go back to our file, we'll paste this in here, and we'll just call this Arbitrum. I think it's Arbitrum, right? Yeah, Arbitrum. So we'll just copy that name because I can't be able to type that out. Arbitrum logo, like this. So what we'd actually do here is make this like an icon button. So what we can actually do is, to make this more reusable, is do interface button props, like so, right? And if there's an icon, which is going to be a JSX.element, and it's an optional element, but if there is one, then what we want to do is just render it in here. So like this, we'll do button props there, and then we'll do icon. And if there is an icon, then we just want to render the icon like that. And that's how that works. And obviously also we need like a label or some text value, which is a string. So that's also to consider. And then you could have all sorts of things to make this more expandable and more reusable. You could have things like positioning, so you could pass in a prop like where you want the icon to be positioned, and then based on that you could put it left or right, etc. But for this use case, we're going to just assume that it's on the left, and then put the icon, sorry, the icon there, and then the label, which we need to get as well by deconstructing it like we have done above. I loves doing that whenever I type that comma and then label in here. Ooh, dear oh dear, having a bit of a mare there. Label, there we go. So that will do this. I'm also going to just copy this and move that for now. So that will do this for us. Then we can just go into our modal header in here, and then inside of this, inside there, we can just do the following. Oh dear. Button, which we're going to get from the UI. We need to also do the usual export thing that I've been doing. So if I go back to this file, this folder, we need to also import the button in here too. So if we do button, there we go, export the button out of this. Oh, but there we go, save that, and then go back to our modal header, get the button in from here, like this, and then now what we can do is do this here, render the button, like so, pass in a label, which will be Arbitrum, like this, and then we can pass in as well an icon, which we're going to pass in the Arbitrum logo, and then that should render it somewhat like we need it to. Okay, so there's some styling things we have to change here, but it's more or less there. So we need to look at this again. So the distance between this and this is 8. I'm supposing it's 12. Okay, so we just need to change the styles inside of the button. So this will be 2, I believe. Nope. PR, yeah. PR will be oh no. PR will be 2. Oh no, hang on, sorry. That's correct as it is. It's just that this is now 2 rather than, I think. Let's just check this style. So I want to have the span, and I want the PR to also be 2 on here. Okay, I see why. It needs to be this one. There we go. That looks about right, actually. That does look right. So maybe a little bit less on that. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just got PY. Maybe the text is a little bit less, so we can just do 1.5. And that should do that. That looks okay to me. And then we also need to add some margin to the button. So we'll just do mx of dash 0.5. Give it some margin. Like this, although I don't know how much space is between them here. It's quite a bit. So what we'll probably do actually is not do that there. We'll just go back to our header and we'll just wrap this button in a div. And then on the div, we'll just put on there some see, and then on the div we will just create the margin that we're looking for. So if I do class name, and then we'll just do ml-1 because it looks like a reasonable amount of space between it. And so there's that. Okay, so now we're getting there. So it does look like a bit more. Let's just check. 8. So yeah, it's 2. So ml2. And so now we have the correct spacing. And now we have this thing that we have to add in. But I honestly, I realize why now, because it's last 24 hours. So if I do, it's actually this. Right, that's what it's supposed to look like. And it's supposed to render as last 24 hours. So with that in mind, we could create a function that just, we'll figure that out in a second. I have an idea for that. We can just create like a custom function that you can render. We'll have like a function that's optional that you can pass it into the dropdown called custom label or something like this, and it will just render custom labels. So we'll do that. So that's that bit sorted. Now for the final part of this is this bit here. This is an SVG. This is just some small text. So we'll do this quickly. This will take not very long. I guess we'll call this like a tooltip. I'm not really sure what we should call this. Personally, what I would do from a UX perspective is I would have this somewhere like around here, because I'm not sure what this is supposed to have. Oh, I see. On drop down click. What? Performance range. Change performance value. Oh, I see. You want me to implement that probably, but I'm not going to implement that. Yeah, so there's that. Then what we need to do is, sorry, I forget what I was doing now. Yeah, so we need to do this bit, next bit. So we'll go to the UI and we'll just call it a tooltip, even though it's not really that. And then we'll just inside of here create a new file called tooltip.tsx. Import usual stuff. Import React. There we go. Change the quotes to the ones we're using everywhere else to make it consistent. Like so, and then we'll just do export default function, tooltip, oh, like this, boom, we're getting there now, right? I'm getting excited. And then return, and then we'll just return a div, and then we'll just put the text in a p tag like this, and then we'll have like a span that will contain the icon. So we'll do the same thing with this icon here, export it, export as an SVG again, like this, go back, refresh this page. This is SVG to JSX, by the way. I'll leave a link somewhere in the description so that you can use it. Is this the right tooltip? I can't remember if this is it or not, you know. Yeah, it is it. Vector 2, yeah, that's what I just used. So Control C, go back to the code, and then I'll just do a thing here. We'll call this tooltip icon, like this. Okay, then once we've got a tooltip icon, we'll just paste that in here. And then again with this, we'll do that very nicely, just tidy up the code. And then we need to have some text here, so we'll just do an interface again. Call it tooltip props, label as always in the string, and then we'll deconstruct the props again. And from this, we'll just grab that label and paste, or not paste, but put it in here. There we go. So that's how we do this. And then we go back to the header for the modal. And then inside of this, we now want to render this component, which will be here. And then inside, we just do the label. Oh, did I call it? Oh, I've not imported it, I know why. Also, we need to go inside of this file again and bring it in. Tooltip, like so. Export it like this. Oh, put a new line, save that. Go back to middle header, and then import it from our UI folder. And now inside of this, we can do label, and then we'll just say, I think it was performance range, wasn't it? Oh, don't know what's going on there. We can just go inside of this, quickly go back to our thing here, and then inside this performance range, there we go. Right, so now we've done that, let's quickly check what it looks like. Okay, so now we need to style this as well. So we'll quickly go back to the code. I'm going to just add the class name in for flex, item center, that should do that. Then we just need to, this looks a bit small as well, which is another concerning thing. We just need to style the text now, the font. So let's see. Look at the actual code a second. Oh, don't want to comment on things. Inspect, look at this. What's the size? 13 pixels, 12, so it'll be XS. So if we go back to the code and we just type in for this here, class name, text, dash SM, or XS for extra small. Is it bold? Font weight's 500, so we want font medium too, which I can't remember for the life of me how to spell medium. There we go. So font medium, and if we do that, okay, so we're getting somewhere. We also need to make sure the color's correct, which in design it is this color, which I'm not even going to attempt to find because I know it won't be in the Tailwind's color palette. So we'll just do color. There's that, and then we need to put some margin on it as well. MR dash, oh no, hang on. Yeah, we do want to put margin mr-0.5. I think that should do this. And then, what size is that there? 10 pixels. Okay. We'll just check the size in the app a minute, because it doesn't look like 10 pixels to me in the app. So if I just do height 10 pixels, width 10 pixels. I mean, it's the measurements it's supposed to be, so we'll leave that. But it does have 9, so 8 more or less. So we'll just do on this as well. Yeah, we want that. And then on the span, we want to put a class name of mr-2. And that should be that now. That's it, really. That's it. And we've now finished it. So there's the design done. It works. Obviously, this looks a bit weird, as you'd imagine it would do, but the design's the design, so I've done what they asked me to do. I would probably move this if it was myself to somewhere else, but there we go. There's the assignment done. That's how you create the modal. So if you have enjoyed watching this, then please subscribe or follow me on Twitter. If you're new, my name's George. I'm a degreeless developer, and my plan is to help you become a developer without a degree. So follow me for more content. Please like, and thanks, and have a nice day.